The HR Stories podcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories helps businesses, nonprofits, and HR practitioners better manage the employee experience, providing the tools, training, and resources needed to get HR right. For more information, check out our website at theteam@hrstories.com. Each week on the HR Stories podcast, HR and leadership experts John Thalheimer and Chuck Simikian dive into the stories that matter most to you, our listeners. We have found that there is a lesson in every story. And now our host, John Thalheimer and Chuck Simikian.
Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. I'm Chuck Charles Simikian, SPHR, SHRM, SCP, and, well, just generally, I guess, good guy. But let me tell you about a better guy, a nicer guy. John, uppercase T, Thalheimer, MS, Master of the Sciences, Master of the Arts, Master of Disaster, and all things leadership. Folks, we are excited. We are the team at HR Stories with the HR Stories podcast. And let me tell you something. I'm excited because, well, a couple of things. Number one, I get to do the intro right away. Usually John takes that. So I just started talking, John. Sorry.
Hey, look, I love that you took that responsibility. It's always fantastic that you did. Lovely. That was a wonderful way blown, like, over the top introduction, but you know, whatever. That's the mood you're in for today. I'm happy to do it. I think that's sleep deprivation, but I could be wrong. But I'm happy to be here. We got a lot of great stories to talk about, a lot of things going on in the news at this time of year. We got administration changing in probably a little more than a month now. Federal administration, I should say, that is promising for disruption. And so I think everyone in HR, everyone in leadership, everyone in payroll should definitely get ready for the ride, because it's going to be an interesting ride on what the decisions they make, what regulation they keep, what regulations they get rid of. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We may be in a little chaos mode for maybe a year or two.
Yeah, it will be. You know, we see things switch, and every time there's a switch in Washington, D.C., pendulum goes one way or the other. This type of a switch from Democrat to Republican tends to be more employer friendly. So we shall see where we go. We just saw the rollback of the FLSA salary threshold, which I think was probably brought on by the change in administration. Just that change is in the air in that regard. But you know, another reason I'm excited, John, and is our book. We got the proof of our book. We're about to go live on Amazon. And John is holding up for those that are watching. It is a thick book. It is heavy. It was so exciting to feel the ultimate book of HR, checklist edition, in my hands. I took it to work.
How did you?
Took it to work, showed a few people. They were blown away. They were like, oh my gosh, how did it take that long? You must have taken forever. And I'm like, there's a lot of stuff here. Almost 300 pages of checklists and knowledge and materials. And folks, you can get the downloadable PDF right now if you go to ultimatebookofhr.com, ultimatebookofhr.com.
Ultimate guide. That's the ultimate guide.
Oh, geez. Yes.
He doesn't even know the title of the book, ladies and gentlemen. That's his level of sleep deprivation.
Ultimate Guide to HR. Ultimate Guide to HR.com. Don't listen to me before. Listen to me now.
Yeah, the Ultimate Guide to HR.com. I had that same reaction, Chuck. So I got it like a day or two before you. And it was so interesting, that feeling of, right, because we've had the book out, the digital download been available for, a month or two now, and to get the proof of the printed version, there was maybe a little sense of pride, a little sense of awe.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of experiencing. I showed it to my lovely and talented wife, and she's like, "Wow, there's something about having a printed version of it." And so hopefully we will be getting that on Amazon. It's going to be in local retailers. Hopefully in December, maybe early January. So you'll hear more about that soon. And so we'll definitely let you all know that it's now available in those places. So
yeah. So it's very exciting. So what do you have in the news, John? I've got a few things in the HR world of news and views and
so
crazy stuff.
This is something that we've talked about a couple times, but I want to bring it back because there was another article about this. But in 2030, we are forecasting that there will be a worker shortage by 6 million. Right? And so there's people like what they say is there's people retiring, right? So we know that I think it's this year or 2025 will be the height of baby boomer retirement. Like when the most baby boomers can retire, whether they retire or not is up to them. So that's coming, right? So we know that retirement is coming. We also know that there's more mismatches between what we need and the jobs available, right? So there may be people out there, but they don't have the skill sets. And I read this, and this is interesting. So there's a decline in workforce participation by men.
Ooh.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, right? And so I'm not sure why that is. I don't really have any details in the article about that, but I just thought it was interesting. But here's what the article is about. One of the solutions to this lack of workers is going to be immigration, right? And I'm not talking about illegal immigration. I'm talking about legal immigration. And what happened in 2023, it went up highest percentage than it ever has, right? And so 18.6% of our country's labor force at the moment is immigrants, which tend to be younger, right? So they tend to be younger that are in there. So let me see. With 1.6 million new arrivals, the total foreign-born population of the country spiked to 47.8 million, right? And so again, that's happening. And so I think that we need to be thinking about, I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday. Was that yesterday? Oh my goodness. She works not for the United Nations, but like the United Nations Junior, like the state United Nations. And we were talking about Tennessee because I was in Tennessee at the time. And she said there are 30 different languages spoken in the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
And there's just as many different cultures in the state of Tennessee. And this doesn't include indigenous people, the Native Americans. So those languages are not incorporated in there. And so we need to be thinking about it. That workforce is coming in. How do we bring them in? How do we give them that sense of belonging? How do we get them working so they feel good about their jobs and that kind of stuff? So it's something to start thinking about probably over the next couple of years. You're probably going to have more people of more diversity in your workforce just because more people are coming out from outside our country into our country because of the job opportunities.
Yeah. You know, I don't know how many of our listeners out there use H-2B visa folks, but they just on Friday, or I'm sorry, a couple Fridays ago, just approved an emergency allotment of 65,000 H-2B visas. And where my company is, we're going to take advantage. We're going to try and file for 41 of those, but they go quick and they're in need. There's a lot of hoops you have to go through for some of that legal immigration, but it does bring in folks from other countries. And let me tell you something, the folks that we bring in, they work, they want to work. They're here for one reason, to work, to make money. So yeah. It's refreshing. And so that's interesting. That's a great statistics there.
Yeah, and that's funny. And so I'm going to go to my next story, Chuck. I'm just taking over.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, because it's interesting because I read another article, and I don't have it here in front of me, but managers have said that they are getting rid of Generation Z workers a lot faster because they're not performing well. They're not living up to that standard. They're not working hard. They're not doing it. And so what are they doing? They're firing them. They're like, hey, you're not doing the work. We're going to fire you.
What is that Generation Z, John? Like what time frame, age frame we're looking at right now?
Generation Z is the one after the millennials. So they are, I can't remember the years. I think it's 2004 or something up till now.
Okay.
And then the alpha generation is coming up. That's the next generation after
Gotcha.
that.
So these would be our younger workers in the workforce right now. You're 16, 18, 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, maybe 28-year-olds. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they're just not working out. And so they're getting rid of them. And to me, Chuck, I don't know if you know what I'm going to say. That's the manager's responsibility. It's totally the hiring manager, the onboarding, orientation is not preparing them for the workforce. And they're not interviewing well, and they're not doing it. People are just going, oh, we're just going to hire them, and not preparing them to work in the workforce. So that's
perhaps I think it could be deeper than that. Parents, schools, maybe an attitude. I don't know. And we could probably talk a long time about this because I have experience hiring folks in that age range. Some people, and one young lady we just promoted from a server to an assistant manager. She is stellar, right? But then we also have other folks that just they call off. That's the big thing I notice. In that age range, there is a ton of call-offs. Calling off. It's like, what? How many times can you be sick in a month, in a year? So, and it's not an ADA thing or a FMLA thing or anything. It's just, they just don't want to come to work. And so it's really
and I think
weird.
They're taking more mental health days. And so they're using, out of their 5 pedo days, one of those is always a mental health day. And so they're more likely to do that. Right. And so, I've been doing a lot of strategic conversations with a state Department of Health and the state Department of Mental Health. And it's scary when you think about the lack of resources for individuals that have mental health issues out there. And so it definitely needs to be addressed, not in the workplace, but it needs to be addressed community wide.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I it's funny. And I got some statistics for you here. And on my side of things for my stories, but I will tell you, I got a 23-year-old daughter. She works at the University of Tennessee. Go Vols.
The Orange.
Yeah. And she's just a worker, social media type, like staff, right? But she, is hourly, right? And because she works overtime, she has the option of working, banking PTO.
Oh, because she's in the state.
And I said, you should be making more. She's like, oh, no. I need to say, I'm going to save for PTO so I can travel and have some days off, some mental health days. I'm like, you're 23. You need to work. You need OT, 10 hours of OT a week, 5 hours of OT a week. Start paying for your school loans. Forget about the mental health days. You're too young not to need mental health days. Be my age and work all your life, and then you need mental health days. So, I mean, it's lighthearted, like ribbing with her, but part of me is like, okay, balance it out. Take some overtime, and then next week take a mental health PTO bank.
Ladies and gentlemen, Generation X at the work, right? Yeah. So that's hilarious. You sound like an old angry man.
Get off my lawn, you kids! Get off my lawn!
You crazy kids! All right, what do you got for me?
Well, just a couple weeks ago, and we haven't really talked about this yet, but the U.S. EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, detailed its financial report for fiscal year 2024. And there's a lot of stuff in this, but just in a nutshell for our listeners that may have missed this, the EEOC has been fielding calls, and I don't know what the number was last year, but they say it was a record year. They fielded 640 1,000 inquiries from the public via its toll-free number, its other phone lines, and they did say it's a double-digit percentage increase over the last 3 fiscal years. And they say one of the big drivers, John, has been the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act. When that got released, the implementation of the PWFA really added more inquiries to the EEOC. But I do have some statistics here that in their fiscal year, which ended September 30th, 2024, they did file 110 lawsuits, and 48 were cases under the Americans with Disabilities Act. 7 cases were for age discrimination. 5 cases were for Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't field more questions about it, which they did. That helped increase their phone volume. But that's really something. 5 cases, boom. And we've been warning people. This is serious, folks. This is serious, folks. Get this, 5 sexual harassment cases on behalf of teenage workers. Workers, yes. And and then 4 cases for sex discrimination based on sexual orientation, and 3 cases, and we've been warning people, you may not agree, you may not like it, you may whatever, but gender identity is the law, right? You cannot discriminate based on that. And they have filed 3 cases on sex discrimination based on gender identity. So I thought that was that doesn't add up to 110 because there was a couple other cases involving different practices and policies of discrimination and things like that. But I thought that was really fascinating that with the EEOC, they're still on the move. And I mean, we'll see what happens with the next administration, but I think you always have to be careful and follow the law.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key. We need to follow the law. And then sometimes we disagree with it. Sometimes we agree with it, but we need to follow the law because that's the law. Right. And so I think there are people out there, and I love that we're getting that message out there. Like, hey, there is a organization, government agency that oversees this. And not only is that there's a federal EEOC, you may have a state Equal Employment Opportunity Commission as well. And so paying attention to that and what they say and all that kind of stuff, right? And so we want to be there. That's great. Thank you for bringing those statistics. Now, you mentioned to me our big story of today is about a grandmother.
Grandma. Okay, it involves grandma. It involves beer.
Well, that makes sense. All right. Do we have any other stories we want to wrap on, or do we want to take a break?
Well, I do have something from the weird, wacky world of HR, just real briefly.
I love those.
Talking about mental health days and living in New York. If you're in New York, listen, there are some members of New York City Council. This hit the wires a couple weeks ago also, are aiming to combat the ongoing mental health crisis and reduce stress for pet owners by introducing a bill that would expand the city's paid sick leave law to include time off for employees who need to care for their sick pets. At first, I'm like, that's weird and wacky. But, those that have little fur babies, and there's plenty of people that might have their kids are out of the house. They just have their doggies or their kitties now, or they never had kids, and their fur baby is their baby. It recognizes that to many pet owners, their animals are more than just pets. They're often seen as family members, and if enacted, the legislation would allow employees to take off for an ill pet's treatment or recovery while also providing safeguards to the employee's income. And I got to tell you, John, if you've had dogs, I have dogs, when the dog is sick and you got to get into work and you're like, this is not the day for the dog to be, getting sick and throwing up and he's not,
Right.
what's going on? And, he's, we don't know. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if it's going to take off, but I thought I would just share it.
No, that's great. It was funny. I was working on a company's or nonprofits employee handbook. And so we were going through it page by page. I had done most of all the work, but we were just going through to make sure it's updated. We got to the bereavement section. And, we had the typical people in the bereavement section in there, close family members. But I started talking to them. What about pets? Do you want to give somebody time off if their pet passes away? And they hadn't thought about it, right? But I mean, again, right? If you've ever gone through that, that's a beloved member of your family. Maybe you don't give them as much time, but maybe you give them a day off. I get there's a lot of kind of things going on there. The other one that we talked about in terms of bereavement was, what about that close friend, right? And so sometimes, yes, a family member dies, terrible, but sometimes it's that close friend that passes away that really hurts that employee's performance, right? And so kind of figuring that out and talking about that and really looking at the real world may be important when it comes to bereavement. And then again, when, city councils are looking at this, it's interesting to kind of see, giving people time off to take care of their pets. I can see it, right? And so,
John, we're going to take a quick break and
right.
we'll come right back. We're going to talk about how a single email turned a retirement into a termination. And you've been listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. Hey, it's Chuck here with the team at HR Stories. In the fast-paced world of HR, you need solutions fast. We are introducing our new book, The Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition, your go-to resource for navigating the complexities of HR with confidence and ease. Hey, whether you're an experienced HR professional, a student, or a small business owner, this book is designed to give you immediate answers to a wide range of HR challenges. Wasting time sifting through endless reference books, unreliable web content, countless YouTube videos, our guide cuts through the noise with over 80 actionable HR checklists that cover everything you need in the world of HR, from onboarding and performance management to legal compliance, crisis response. We've got you covered. Why is this book a must-have? Because it provides you with immediate answers, saving you time, helping you avoid costly mistakes, and it's an essential tool for anyone looking to elevate their HR game. So head on over to the Ultimate Guide to HR.com. That's Ultimate Guide to HR.com to get your copy of the Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. Streamline your HR tasks, stay compliant, and create a workplace where both employees and management thrive. Welcome back to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. Employee terminations are, John, I call it the capital punishment of the employment process. And yeah, and they're one of the most challenging aspects of HR. Sometimes they're very straightforward. It's a clear violation of policy. But what happens when an employee claims discrimination? And I've seen that before. But today's story dives into a case that highlights the importance of policy enforcement, perception, and documentation.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, right? I think it's really important. Terminations are a really important stage, and we need our documentation, we need our processing. I've gone through a lot of terminations, right, as part of my roles and my jobs. Not that I've been terminated. I have been, but not very often. And to me, after a while, they became very straightforward, right? I'd done the documentation. I'd known I've done the progressive discipline. I had all that information. And we'll get into the termination meeting, and suddenly they'll bring up a case of, oh, well, I was discriminated against, right? Which kind of derails that whole conversation, because now, like, well, was it really happening, or were they just claiming that? And so now we have to go do that investigation to figure that out. I try to figure that out ahead of time. Like, I go through and I make sure that we're being very thorough in our organization, that we're not terminating someone based on or perceived discrimination, right? And so kind of doing that as well.
Yeah. So imagine now all your experiences that you're dealing now with a model employee.
Oh, I was a model.
Of course you were. Look at that look. Those of you can see that square jaw if you're watching us on YouTube right now. But imagine being a model employee for 17 years, beloved by your team and community. Then one mistake, seemingly a small decision and a bad decision, right, leads to your termination and a legal battle claiming age discrimination. And that's the story of Gloria Cucuzzo. Gloria Cucuzzo, a longtime Trader Joe's employee who became the center of a debate about fairness, consistency, and company policy. John, this just hit the airways the wire, shall we say, in November of 2024. This is a very recent case.
17 years. Working for a company for 17 years. That's a long time to work anywhere, right? I was saying the other day in one of my workshops, one of my leadership workshops, Chuck, is that one of the things that I don't know, it suddenly have dawned on me that for most of our employees, their journey, we're only connecting with them on part of their journey, right? They're only going to be with our organization. I think the average is like 4.5 years, right? People stay in an organization. So we're only there, but thinking about tripling that and being with an organization for 18 years. She must have been dedicated.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, Gloria Cucuzzo was. Her supervisors described her as outstanding and a role model. She wasn't just any other employee, John. She was seen as the heart of her store. In fact, well, I can't wait to tell you more.
Tell me more. Like, how did she get into that legal battle?
Yeah, so let's go back to 2003. Gloria Cucuzzo first joins Trader Joe's in Brookline, Massachusetts.
Brookline.
So at the time, get this, is it Brookline or Brooklyn?
It's Brookline.
Brookline, yep. Massachusetts. So, and I say, okay, Brookline, Massachusetts, because here's the deal. In 2003, and granted, this just got wrapped up this past year, right? She was 60 years old in 2003.
Wow.
Yes, and she quickly became a standout employee. By 2012, she was promoted to merchant, and that's considered in Trader Joe's a leadership position. It's kind of like a lead, not a manager, but it's kind of like that lead. And she received regular raises throughout her career. But you see, Gloria Cucuzzo wasn't just good at her job. And as I dug into this story, I found out that she was also a community figure. Her customers loved her. They loved her. She was often referred to as a true neighborhood icon. And in August 2020, at the age of 77, she received a $1,200 performance bonus and another raise. By all accounts, Gloria was thriving and loving life.
I mean, that's the kind of employee we want, right? We want to have that type of employee working for our company that's dedicated. We're giving them bonuses. They're getting raises. So what happened?
Well, on February 20th, 2021, Gloria was working her usual 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. shift, while her grandson, Kevin Quinn, who was also an employee, was scheduled to start later that afternoon. So Kevin's 19 years old, and he's too young to legally purchase alcohol. But sometime during their overlapping shifts, Kevin selects beer from the alcohol section and hands it to Gloria. she then purchases the beer on his behalf.
Wait, so her grandson, wow, her grandson was also working at the same Trader Joe's there.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Makes it messier, doesn't it?
It does. And Gloria later testified, she didn't think much of it. She said that Kevin often drank beer at family dinners, and in her mind, it was harmless.
But I'm assuming, right? I'm assuming that Trader Joe's has strict policies about alcohol sales across the board.
Yeah, exactly. Their alcohol policy is very clear. No alcohol for anyone under 21, and employees must comply with all state and local laws. Violating the policy could result in anything from a written warning to a termination. You see, another employee witnessed the transaction and immediately reported it to the store manager. Her name was Jennifer Gillum. And Jennifer Gillum confronts Gloria, who then admitted to purchasing the beer for Kevin. Jennifer then escalates the issue to her regional vice president, who agreed that termination was the only option. So Gloria admits it. Yeah, I was buying beer for Kevin. She doesn't deny it. She doesn't say, I had him pick out some beer for me. John, I got to think of a million things to say, right?
Yeah.
I said, hey, grandson, what's a good beer for grandpa? Oh, this one. Well, could you go grab it and give it to me? Okay.
Yeah, right. That's all you have to say.
Yeah,
I'm assuming this is where it took the turn, right? This kind of went there.
Yeah. So 4 days after the incident, Jennifer, the manager, meets with Gloria and gives her a choice. Okay. Retire or be terminated.
That could be a tough choice, right? I mean, did she take retirement? What did she decide to do?
Yeah, initially she did. Initially, yes. But later that day, she sent Jennifer an email saying she didn't think of Kevin's age when she bought the beer, that she was heartbroken to lose her job.
Wow. Right? And so thinking about sending that email, and again, right, her mind was obviously changing, right? She was thinking like, no, I don't want to retire. I want the job back. What can I do to get that?
Yeah. And it was a prior, like you said, a hard email to send, and I imagine it would have been. But here the story takes another interesting twist. Folks, you only going to hear this on the HR Stories podcast. You might have read this story in the news, but you don't know the depth of it. So as I said, at first she chose retirement. Trader Joe's even framed it as a way for her to, keep the narrative on her own terms, which honestly seems like a compassionate option given someone with 17 years of experience with the company.
Yeah, right. It makes sense when we're they broke a policy, we have to terminate them, and we would rather have them on their own retire. Now, there's some things that go into that, right? And so, I mean, again, there's some benefit for her to retire for the company, so there's some of that talk in there, but I'm sure that's not where it ended.
No, it didn't. Well, first, let me say this. This type of choice is not unusual. It's one that I, as an HR director, have employed several times throughout my career. And sometimes it may be a tough termination situation. Maybe it's something along the lines of the person just just help them save face. It wasn't like they stole. If they stole or there was theft or abject dereliction of duty, that's a little different. But sometimes if it's maybe a little unclear, or the person needs to save face, or you just don't want to have them have a termination on their file, you'll give them the option. And I'll sometimes say, I'll give you an option. You can be terminated or you can resign. And if you resign, we will accept your resignation effective immediately. And then you can tell anyone, any reason as to why you've left the company, so to speak. And so I've done that. But yes, you are correct. That is not how it ended. After she retired, Gloria sends an email, and this is the big twist here, sends an email to her manager. In it, she admitted to buying the beer for her grandson and explained she didn't think twice about it. So she testified later, later about this. But before any of this, any of the lawsuits, whatever, she literally sent an email. Said Kevin drinks beer at home with his family. And from an HR perspective, that email was a bombshell because when Trader Joe's got it, they were like, okay, this is not like Jennifer and the employee saying, look, let's just end it right here. It confirmed in writing that she knowingly violated Trader Joe policy. And I actually have the actual the email if I can read it to you. She says, I'm putting this in writing to explain about me being fired from Trader Joe's after 16 years. This termination was prompted by purchasing beer for my grandson, Kevin, who was coming to dinner that evening at my home. I totally did not think of his age! ! Kevin does drink beer at home with his family. So I did not think twice about this transaction. I love my job at Trader Joe's, therefore would do nothing to jeopardize my position. I'm saddened by this whole incident because I valued my job. Trader Joe's is a fabulous company.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly changed everything because once the leadership at Trader Joe's reviewed the email, they then changed her retirement status to termination.
So why would they do that?
Yeah, well, a couple of reasons. Number one, first, she admitted it. And not only to breaking company policy, John, but also to breaking the law. And that was a big switch for them on this.
Right.
Secondly, they needed to reinforce the company policy on alcohol sales. It's strict for a reason, especially when the law and the store's liquor license are involved.
Yeah.
Finally, they realized that allowing her to retire might be seen as inconsistent now with how they've handled similar violations in the past. And, from a legal perspective, formally documenting this as a termination gave the company a stronger position in case it ever went to court, which of course it did.
And that's why we're here, right? Yeah, that is a shift, right? And again, it could be a paper shift, right? Changing it from termination to retirement, but there's things that go with that status of retirement that person is no longer going to get. And so being aware of that. And so do you think that email was the one that sealed her fate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we must wait until the end of the story. But we've kind of already let the cat out of the bag a little bit. And I just want to share, a little more briefly that email turned what could have been a graceful exit into a black and white termination. And so for our HR professionals and small business owners that are listening right now, we always talk about written documentation on the HR Stories podcast. And whether it's from the employer or the employee, it can be a deciding factor in how a case unfolds. And I always ask when I'm involved in an investigation of an employee, John, if I was investigating you, I would ask you to write down a statement in your own words as to what happened.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And unfortunately, sometimes that can not be a very good thing for you, depending on what you write. And people, they write, sometimes they're honest, but anyways, ultimately, Gloria filed a lawsuit claiming her termination was due to age discrimination, not the alcohol policy. That's the crazy thing. She says they fired me because of my age, not the alcohol policy violation. And she argued that and here we go. This is why. She then remembered somehow, or someone told her, hey, there were 6 younger employees who violated the same policy, but they weren't fired.
Yeah. So did they do the same thing? Well, how did that happen?
Well, that's the thing. They they did not. The court reviewed the cases and found key differences. So someone at Trader Joe's was doing a great job of documenting scrupulously these situations, because even when the court reviewed it, they were like, okay, these have nothing to do with what happened to Gloria. 5 of those 6 employees just failed to check IDs when selling alcohol, but there's no evidence they knowingly sold to underage customers. They just got caught in like a sting operation. Gloria, on the other hand, admitted she knew Kevin was 19 when she bought the beer.
Apples and oranges, right?
Exactly. The court also addressed her claim that Jennifer, the manager's offer to let her retire was discriminatory. And here's the nice little twist. Gloria argued it was a sign of age bias, but the court disagreed. Even the court saw it as an attempt to let her leave on better terms, not as evidence of discrimination.
And so what happened to her grandson?
Yeah, it's interesting. Once again, research on the HR Stories podcast, folks. You're not going to read this in any news article. Kevin actually resigned shortly after the incident, but he was not disciplined by Trader Joe's. The focus remains squarely on Gloria.
So what lessons are they from this? Like, what lessons should I, HR professional, leadership, what should I take away?
Sure. So the first thing, lesson 1, is consistency is key. Trader Joe's was able to show their response to Gloria's violation was consistent with their policies. By documenting that distinction between Gloria's case and her other co-workers' cases, they demonstrated that her termination was not about age, it was about her actions.
And I think this is a great story, kind of showing how Trader Joe's got it right. Right? And that documentation really is a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to lesson 2, clarity in policies. Trader Joe's alcohol policy was crystal clear. No alcohol sales to anyone under 21, and they preached it, they emphasized it, and it was unmistakably, it was not confusing at all.
Yeah, and so I'm going to throw this little curveball to you, Chuck.
Woo, okay.
Right? Because she bought the alcohol.
Yes.
Right? She bought the alcohol. She might have bought it for Kevin, but she bought it with her own money, her own dollars. So she technically didn't buy it. And so if she had it in her locker versus Kevin having it in his locker, I wouldn't have argued that. Like, no, you didn't break the state law. But she probably gave it to Kevin. Kevin probably put it in his locker. Kevin was under 19. Boom, you're terminated. Okay, so next.
Okay, so yeah, and no, it's okay. And lesson 3, documentation matters, which we've mentioned this. I'm not going to keep beating this up, but look, Jennifer, the manager, documented every step of the process, which is fantastic that Trader Joe's has it must have a great training program, or Jennifer Gilliman is just a savant when it comes to documentation. But from the initial report to the termination decision, and that documentation was critical in defending the company's actions in court. Jennifer, maybe we should have you on as a guest at some point, and you could talk about documentation.
Yeah, so we said it already, but Trader Joe's did a good job, right?
Yes. Yeah, they did a good job with this. And they honestly, they handled it pretty well. They had a clear policy in place. They enforced it consistently. They documented it thoroughly. They escalated the decision to their regional VP, and they kept their message aligned. However, there's an area, if there's any area that they could have done better, it might be in the way they communicated with Gloria. So lesson 4.
Okay.
Words matter. Words matter. So offering retirement as an option was meant to soften the blow. They were trying to be nice. But in hindsight, it opened the door to her claim of age discrimination. And anytime you tie retirement to a disciplinary situation, you can't see me on the podcast, but you could see me if you're watching on YouTube, you run the risk of being interpreted as age-related bias.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Just a clearer approach. I mean, again, I think that's the right option in those cases. She was 77. Giving her that option, I think I still would have done it. But I hear what you're saying in terms of like, we have to be clear and be careful that we're not discriminating against. But again, if I have all the other documentation, I feel good. I feel comfortable in there.
Yeah, I might have said you have the option to resign or be terminated, but maybe at Trader Joe's, based on their retirement programs, maybe there's a true retirement that by saying I'm retiring rather than resigning. But anyways, so the policy, so there's subtle differences, and it could have helped them avoid that legal challenge. But HR professionals need to think about not what they say, but also how it can be perceived later, especially in sensitive situations. So, John, I don't want to get to the wrap up here, but at the heart of the story is a reminder that HR isn't just about policies. It's about balancing fairness, consistency, and integrity. And Gloria's story highlights the importance of those clear policies, enforcing them consistently, and documenting everything. It's kind of like, what was that song? What Disney musical was that? Tale as old as time. Tale as old. Beauty and the Beast, right? This is a tale as old as time when it comes to HR, clear policies, enforcement, and documentation. There you go.
Yeah,
tale as old as time.
I think this has been a great story, Chuck. I thank you for bringing it to us. I think there's a lot of great lessons that we can take away from it. Hopefully listeners, I would go back and listen to those lessons. If you didn't miss something, go back and listen to those, because I think it really did a good job. And Chuck, so thank you so much for bringing this here. I think it's definitely going to be a great benefit for the people that were listening to this today.
Yeah. So, are you curious about why it took 3 years to resolve this case, though?
Sure. I guess I am.
Maybe you're not, but maybe our listeners are. They're like, wow, 3 years. I mean, she was 80 years old. She's still alive. Gloria's still alive. And she's 80 years old. And the incident happened in 2021. And let me just break it down for you, for our listeners. Just a little extra info here on the HR Stories podcast. In this situation, in a lot of these situations, first is that internal process, that has to go through, and the meetings and the termination itself. And then the employee decides to file a lawsuit and the company's response to that lawsuit. Now, EEO, equal employment opportunity situations, especially like age discrimination, are normally filed with the EEOC as a complaint. And then there's an exchange of letters, and the company provides documentation. The EEOC will then take it forward and issue something called a right to sue letter. And it's all part of the process. They then will decide, does the employee want to take it forward and sue? And once that lawsuit's filed, the legal process kicks in. So in Gloria's case, her legal team argued that her termination was rooted in age discrimination. So then they needed to find additional evidence comparing her situation to other employees. And there's a lot of back and forth on motions. So that's even Trader Joe's moved for summary judgment, which is like, hey, let's dismiss it. Let's kick it out. This is a stupid case. But right. But finally this case went to appeals. And it just added more time, and the appeals courts can take a year or more to hear arguments. So, it is really the system itself. It's designed to ensure fairness, and that stretches things out.
So here's my question for you. Did she continue to work, or was she terminated at that point?
Yeah, she didn't work after in 2020. So she hadn't worked the last 3 years, at least for Trader Joe's. She may have worked somewhere else, but
yeah. So here's my question for you, just in terms of this process. Now that you got me thinking about it, and so what if they found for her? They found for her that it was age discrimination. My assumption is that she would get back pay for those 3 years. And probably get her lawyers paid for by Trader Joe's. Is that
probably
how that would play out?
There would have been fines. There would have been some sort of restitution and other things. But I would have been shocked. This was pretty much a nice box case. And I have to tell you, it is frustrating that even when a company thinks they're doing everything correctly, they can still spend 3 years in court and tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm sure they didn't want to settle out of court because they thought they had a lock case. And I believe they did. However, Gloria might have had a savvy attorney that said, you know what? I think we can get them on a technicality, maybe wear them down, get them to settle, which Trader Joe's did not.
Yeah, and a lot of times companies settle, right? They'll settle just because it's easier, and it's cheaper, and it's better than paying lawyers $400, $500 an hour. It's cheaper to do that, right? And so I get to see that, right? And that's what, as HR professionals and leaders in small businesses, we need to guide our owners to be like, hey, we got this. This is clear. We have all the documentation. Or like, well, we're concerned about this. Blah, blah, blah. It may be better to settle and just kind of give them that information, but work closely with your employment lawyers on making those decisions.
Folks, thanks for joining us at this episode of the HR Stories podcast. Make sure you check us out on the HR Team of One Facebook page. Don't forget to check out the Ultimate Guide to HR.com, Ultimate Guide to HR. That's our book that we just wrote. And until next time, stay safe out there.
Yeah, and don't forget to communicate with us. We love hearing from you. We love getting our question and answer so we can do our question and answer episodes. Definitely check those out. And don't forget to check out the team at hrstories.com. You can see some of our on-demand classes there. You can see some of the services we offer. You might want to check that out as well. I will see you, Chuck, next week for our question and answer episode.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.